Hello and welcome to Shaping the Concussion Culture in Lacrosse, a joint webinar between the Concussion Legacy Foundation and USA Lacrosse as part of USA Lacrosse's Team Up, Speak Up Week. I'm Dr. Chris Nowinski, co-founder and CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. I'd like to thank USA Lacrosse for being such a great, consistent partner with us and for promoting Team Up Speak Up on an annual basis. Team Up Speak Up is a CLF program designed to reduce the worst outcomes of concussion by educating athletes that they have a responsibility to speak up if they think their teammate has a concussion. We are grateful to have the support of governing bodies like USA Lacrosse to help share this potentially life-saving message. Today's webinar is jam-packed with great information and guests. We'll hear from Dr. Chris Vaughan, a pediatric neuropsychologist for Children's National Hospital, to get a concussion 101 and learn why immediate removal from play is so important. USA Lacrosse head athletic trainer Kellie Lohr will explain why athletic trainers need a strong concussion culture to properly do their jobs. And finally, two former lacrosse players affected by concussion, Pat Dowling and Warden, will share their stories and discuss why a program like Team Up Speak Up is so essential in lacrosse. But first, a quick background on CLF and Team Up Speak Up. I co-founded CLF with Dr. Robert Cantu in 2007 after my own experience with post-concussion syndrome. I was a former Harvard football player turned WWE wrestler who got kicked in the head a few too many times. Dr. Cantu helped me understand how little I knew about concussions, which inspired me to create awareness around the injury. 15 years later, I'm now a neuroscientist working harder than ever with my team to achieve our vision of a world without CTE and concussion safety without compromise. The CDC estimates that somewhere between 1.6 and 3.8 million sports-related concussions occur each year. If each one of those concussions were managed and treated properly, we'd be in pretty good shape. However, study after study has shown that only a fraction of concussions are reported. We have far too many athletes suffering concussions and not receiving the care they need. And as you'll hear from our panelists, not getting proper treatment after concussion increases the risk for very serious short and long-term health issues. We launched Team Up Speak Up in 2015 to help change concussion culture so that more concussions will be recognized and diagnosed. Team Up Speak Up is unique because it specifically addresses the factors that stop athletes from speaking up about concussion. This is done by asking teammates to be on the lookout for signs of concussion and speak up if they see another teammate with a concussion. Team Up Speak Up is designed this way for two reasons. First, we're talking about a concussion, a brain injury that changes the way we think and behave. We can't expect someone who may have a brain injury to be able to recognize and react to their own injury. Second, we know athletes aren't reporting their concussions in large part because of social pressures. They don't want to lose playing time, to appear weak, or to hurt their team. Team Up Speak Up leverages the bystander intervention model used in anti-bullying campaigns. Successful anti-bullying campaigns don't ask the bullied to speak up. Instead, they empower bystanders around the situation to speak up when they see something wrong. We frame Team Up Speak Up as a way to be a good teammate. In practice, Team Up Speak Up is a preseason speech given by a coach or team leader to the team. The speech is designed to be very short with sticky messages that a teammate with a concussion may need your help. Here is an example of what the speech looks like from the MIT women's lacrosse team.
We're a team, and teammates look out for each other. A teammate with a concussion needs your help. I expect you to speak up to a coach or athletic trainer if you think a teammate has a concussion. Team up, speak up! Team up, speak up!
As you can see, the speech is short, easy to give, and powerful. You can help bring this life-saving speech to your team by heading to teamupspeakup.org and take the pledge to give the speech. When giving the speech, make sure to record it and share it on social media using the hashtag TeamUpSpeakUp. That's Team Up Speak Up at a glance, but I'm really excited to dive into this important topic with our other guest today. We'll kick things off with a presentation from my old friend, Dr. Chris Vaughan, a pediatric neuropsychologist at Children's National Hospital. Dr. Vaughan is the Assistant Director of the Safe Concussion Outcome Recovery and Education, or SCORE program, and is the perfect person to explain concussions for us today. Take it away, Dr. Vaughan.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me on to talk about some basics on concussion and to share this information with your audience. Just for background, I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist here at Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. For those that don't know, a pediatric neuropsychologist is a licensed psychologist with training in specialization in pediatrics and in the neurological bases of brain functioning and behavior. Really, we are specialists who look at understanding brain behavior relationships that include the effects of brain injury, particularly as they relate to children. As a pediatric psychologist and neuropsychologist, one of our overarching goals is to really try to figure out how we can make sports safer for our kids. We certainly understand the benefits of sport and play, the role that fun and competition have in helping to raise children who have self-confidence and have good social relationships, and really how the exercise and physical activities involved in sports promote favorable growth and development. But to do that, we need to understand how to make sports safer. And one of the activities that I'm involved with at Children's National is a number of our research efforts. We have spent years looking at ways to try to develop child-appropriate assessment measures to really take developmental psychology concepts and apply them to understanding the effects of concussion and brain injury. We've built a number of outcome measures that we can look at to try to understand differences in recovery trajectories and try to understand who may have a longer recovery from a concussion. Obviously, children and adolescents are very heavily involved in school activities, and so understanding the effects that a concussion can have on their school functioning and their learning is very critical to this effort. And really helping to prepare schools and other educational settings to support children with concussions and how to help best facilitate their return and successful return to school and to learning. Ultimately, our goal after any injury, of course, is rehabilitation and recovery. And so we've looked at a number of different ways to understand self-efficacy and to build in active rehabilitation models that our patients can use to help recover from brain injury. To make sure everybody's up to speed, a concussion is a traumatic brain injury. We know that there is a change in how the brain is functioning, and that process that changes within how the brain is working is complicated. There's a number of underlying structures and systems that don't work in the way that they were before the injury, and that biomechanical force to the head or body really changes how the brain system is working. We generally think of those changes as being related to cellular dysfunction, that the brain's chemistry, the neurons aren't able to produce energy as effectively, aren't able to communicate as effectively, that there's mismatches in different chemicals inside and outside of cells. And that those changes really define, more so than any structural injury, what a concussion is. And therefore, oftentimes, in fact, very often, there really aren't structural findings. We don't see changes on brain imaging like a CT scan or an MRI. And just because the CT scan or MRI is normal doesn't mean that everything is working normally. And again, really the definition of the concussive injury is that the cells and the underlying brain is not working normally. When somebody has an injury and that affects how the brain is functioning, there's an array of symptoms that can occur. We think of physical, cognitive, emotional, sleep-related changes. Obviously, our brains do a lot in terms of everyday activities. And we know that those symptoms, some of them may last very short periods of time, even several hours, but some may last weeks, months, and even longer. We know that when the brain changes how it's working because of force to the head or body, that there may be visible signs, that we may see differences, that somebody may appear stunned or confused. They may respond to questions more slowly. They may have a glassy-eyed look in their face, or they may not be able to remember things or retrieve information as quickly. There certainly can be the observation of physical changes. If somebody's, of course, throwing up or unconscious, we know that there's been an alteration to how the brain is functioning, and they may have movement and coordination problems. Similarly, we may see changes in just personality and mood when somebody gets hit and their brain is not functioning normally. They may be very irritable or upset easily at things that normally wouldn't affect them. On top of those signs that somebody else may observe, obviously there's the experience of the concussion and the symptoms that somebody reports. Commonly people think of headaches, but there are a number of other physical symptoms like visual problems, blurry vision, nausea, balance problems, dizziness, light and noise sensitivity. Somebody may describe feeling just mentally foggy or not being able to concentrate or having a kind of being in kind of a daze and not being able to think as quickly as they are used to thinking. And we know that brains control and relate to our mood and our emotions. And so individuals with concussions may experience increased sadness or just recognize that they're more irritable or anxious about things. They may have increased need for sleep, or in fact, sometimes trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. It's hard to put a specific number or timeline on the recovery from a concussion. We know that there's differences between boys and girls. We know that information that used to be provided about a 7 to 10 day recovery is really not accurate for a lot of people. A study in 2016 of over 3,000 kids ages 5 to 18 indicated that 70% approximately were better within 4 weeks. But that of course meant that 30% still had some symptoms after a month. What's important about recovery is that, like any injury, we do expect progress. We expect symptoms to get better. And so even if somebody is still having symptoms a month after their concussion, we know that there should be positive changes because our body works to heal and recover. And so certainly if that is not happening, we want to look for reasons why that may be occurring. Speaking briefly about the importance of recognizing concussions, if we don't identify when a concussion has occurred, we know that the risks go up significantly. Individuals who continue to play in sports after sustaining a brain injury, including a concussion, are more likely to sustain another injury. And injury on top of injury is never a good thing, whether it's a broken bone or an injury to your brain. We also worry that additional concussions, particularly before recovery, but even after recovery, we worry that they can be more severe, that they may lead to a slower recovery. And ultimately, if somebody is not recovering successfully or fully, that they may not be able to participate in their activities, or at least may need to find alternative activities that present as being safer for their brain's health. Lastly, we know that successive concussions, particularly those that are close together or on top of another, can lead to some permanent brain-related changes. It's important to mention treatment. We know that the number one and most important treatment for a concussion is to protect the brain. Our body does amazing things to help healing and recovery, but if the brain continues to sustain force after an injury, it's of course going to prevent the healing process. We also really like to emphasize healthy brain activities, the importance of safe and, in the beginning, very low grade, but mild exercise activities that just promote health and recovery. We know that hydration, nutrition are very important, that good sleep, not constant sleeping all day, but good nighttime sleep can be very helpful for the recovery. And also managing stress and the things that tend to make us worry and frustrated can make a difference in how quickly our brain heals. So in terms of managing and how we help, the best path is to identify a concussion early, help to remove somebody from risk so that there's no additional complications, have a speedy, uncomplicated recovery as fast as your brain can allow, and ultimately be able to get back to healthy and developmental activities, healthy activities that are good for your development and brain health and growth. So in conclusion, we know that sports and recreation are a key component of a healthy, developmentally typical lifestyle. We know that concussions are brain injuries and need to be taken seriously. We know that the protection against the risk and the consequences of concussions is really critical, which is why identification and removal from play is so important. Lastly, we know that there are some important things we can do to help with treatment. And although there's some basic principles we like to follow, we also need to be individualized in how we care for our patients with concussion. So thank you very much for taking the time, and Chris, for having me involved in this program. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dr. Vaughan, for that great overview on concussion. Our next guest is Kellie Lohr, who is the head athletic trainer for USA Lacrosse. Kellie is going to share more about how she handles concussion evaluation and management and give us insight into what concussion response looks like in real-time situations.
All right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you guys inviting me to be a part of this. I'm very excited to be here. So as we get started today and talking about concussions and what that means for lacrosse players, I want to introduce myself. My name is Kellie Lohr. I am the head athletic trainer at USA Lacrosse. I'm also a community liaison with MedStar Health. I've been certified since 2009, where I got my bachelor's of science from Westchester University in athletic training. And then I went on to LSU to get my master's in sport administration down there. Since I graduated, I've held a variety of roles, everything from high school sports all the way up to Division I. I've worked with a variety of sports as well. And after leaving my last job in the Division I realm, I had left for a little bit and came back to MedStar Health, where it was perfect timing and I came into the role at USA Lacrosse as their head athletic trainer. So I've seen a little bit of concussions all over the place and have some experience in different realms. So before we talk about concussion recognition, there's some things that we know that some research has shown us, especially in lacrosse. So the first is that concussions are more likely to take place in competitions than practice. We also know that women are more likely to have concussions and to report them than men are. And the source of concussions is a little bit different between men's and women's lacrosse. So for the women, they're more likely to get a concussion from having contact with equipment, so maybe a stick or a ball, whereas the men's sport is a little bit more physical. They're more likely to get a concussion from physically running into or making contact with another player. Regardless of gender, we know that early recognition and early reporting of a concussion is going to lead to shorter recovery time down the road. So how do we recognize concussions and how are they reported most frequently? So as an athletic trainer, most of the time I'm seeing something happen on the field. And, you know, we kind of pay a little bit more attention to those impacts that occur. So even though the play may have moved on to another part of the field, a lot of times I'm still paying attention to the player that got hit or, you know, kind of scanning the area in general. Whereas, you know, a coach or a player, they kind of have moved on to where is the ball and what is the next play going to be. So having an athletic trainer is super valuable to any program because they're the ones that are going to be able to physically see and kind of keep track of any impacts that may happen. But for coaches, players, USA Lacrosse actually put out this really great recognition tool. It's on their website. And I always stress to coaches and especially you know, youth programs or club programs to keep this tool with them, whether it's in a coaching bag or a binder, because it gives you all the steps and all the recognition tools that you need to be able to say, wow, something looked really weird on the field. And these are some things that I can do once I do recognize that it happened. So it's not a tool that's designed necessarily to diagnose a concussion, but more for coaches or parents or even teammates to say like, wow, I saw that head impact. I wonder what the player is going to look like when they come off, or, you know, what kind of symptoms are they having? And I think it's really important for anyone who notices that happen to go over to the player and just ask them, hey, how are you feeling? I saw you get hit in the head, or I saw you collide with that other player. And a lot of times a player is going to report, oh yeah, that really hurt, or I have a headache. So sometimes just prodding the athlete for some information is a great starter to getting more information out of them. The signs and symptoms are on here, and that's similar to some of the more medical evaluation tools that we use, like the SCAT-5 on the sideline. But this is a great tool, like I said, for coaches or players to keep with them and just have another resource available. Unfortunately, there are a lot of barriers for athletes when it comes to reporting. And I kind of break these up into two separate wheelhouses. So the first and the most common barrier that we've seen and a lot of research has shown, not just in lacrosse, but across all sports, is that fear of losing playing time, or fear of letting my team down, fear of feeling weak or appearing like a sissy, or that they don't actually want to play. There's a lot of stigma, I think, around concussions, similar to mental health. And athletes feel the pressure when they can't play. They feel the pressure from teammates, coaches, parents, sometimes fans, people they don't even know. And all of this kind of balls into, reasons why they don't want to tell a coach or an athletic trainer or someone that they're really not feeling too well. On the other side, I think education is one of the biggest parts. There's a huge misconception about concussions, that it's not serious, or people just don't have general information about what a concussion is, or what are the signs, what are the symptoms that they should even be looking for. So I've seen a lot of old school coaches or older generations that kind of wave off concussions or a head impact, and they're like, oh, it's fine, you got your bell rung, or it's not a big deal, just keep playing, play through it. And it's really a huge issue when it comes to concussions, because of all the information that we have about what could happen after a concussion is sustained. So you can see on this slide here is just a research study that was done in 2016, and it kind of gives those barriers and just some numbers to put with them. But both males and females have very similar reactions to, or reasons that they don't disclose that a concussion happened. On the one side over here, you can see, oh, I didn't think it was serious, or I didn't even know I had a concussion, all the way to I didn't want to let my team down. If this game was less important, I would have told someone. So there really is a variety, but they kind of break up into those two different sections that I had mentioned. Fortunately, there's a lot of ways that we can reduce some of these barriers. And one of the biggest ones is education. So early education in a player's career, frequent education. I've worked with a lot of club teams that do annual coaches education classes, or just like review with their coaches things that they should look out for. And it can range anywhere from first aid, CPR, concussion, and just general information for them. But it's always a great time, in my opinion, to plug a little extra education in about concussions, especially for someone that doesn't have an athletic trainer with them on site. Another thing that's really important is emergency action planning, and with that, a concussion management plan. The NCAA actually recommends or requires this for every team to have some type of concussion management tool. But the NCAA is kind of unique in that they have athletic trainers, they have all these other resources with them that can help when it comes to concussions. So for a club team, a youth team, even high schools that don't have athletic trainers, creating this concussion management plan is crucial, so that the expectations are set from the start. I think it's important to have those expectations, because if a player knows what they're going to go through, or what their recovery process will be like, they may be more likely to report that they had a concussion. And it just gives you a better general feel about having a concussion than if there were no expectations, you had no idea what was going on or what the next step would be. And then lastly, having an athletic trainer on site or available to you. Sometimes there just isn't someone there, but even if it's someone that you can call or contact, that's to say, hey, this happened at practice, I really have some questions, can I ask you about it? And they can kind of get you pointed in the right direction so that the concussion can be handled appropriately. And then I would say, when in doubt, sit out. And I think that's kind of the mantra when it comes to concussions across the board. But having that early recognition, early reporting of concussion, like I mentioned earlier, is going to lead to shorter recovery time for boys and girls across all sports. So the sooner we know about it, the sooner we can start treating it, make sure that they're getting the appropriate medical care, and make sure that they're on their path to recovery a little bit sooner. Unfortunately, a lot of times I have to stress to parents some of these unfortunate effects of concussion. So post-concussion syndrome, second impact syndrome, they are both very real things that we experience as athletic trainers. And we, my biggest fear is having someone come out worse from an injury that could have been prevented. So by not removing someone right away from play, we see 10 to 30% of concussions have a recovery of over 6 weeks. So if we get someone pulled out right away and we can have their recovery time be about a week or two till we slowly get them back into play and back into school, it's so much better than missing a month and a half or 2 months from their sport that they want to be playing. And then second impact syndrome, worst case scenario, but when a player has a concussion, they have another one within a certain period of time, death can occur. And it's a really unfortunate thing that 100% could be prevented. So when in doubt, just sit out and make sure that you're letting someone know, or just asking the questions to someone about their symptoms and about what's going on. I'm really excited that USA Lacrosse is working with Team Up, Speak Up. Like I mentioned earlier, education is such a crucial part of concussions and making more people aware of what they're like and the realities around concussions is huge. And it's huge as an athletic trainer because we know we can't be everywhere all the time. So having this resource, having extra education that can go out to parents and coaches and players, and just kind of end that stigma that concussions aren't serious and that there's more to them than meets the eye. These are our brains that we're talking about, and we want to protect them as much as we can. So this is a wonderful initiative. I'm very excited to be a part of it. And I'm really glad that USA Lacrosse has decided to join with Team Up, Speak Up as well.
Amazing stuff, Kellie. Athletic trainers are a vital part of the concussion recognition and response equation. They are heroes for all the work they do, but they can't be everywhere and see everything all the time. Trainers need a strong concussion culture to protect their athletes, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish through Team Up, Speak Up. For this next section, I'm going to hand it over to Brandon Boyd, who is our Education Programs Manager at CLF. Brandon will be interviewing Pat Dowling and Haley Warden, two former lacrosse players who have experienced concussion firsthand.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. It is an honor to be here today with Haley and Pat. Pat Dowling was a star defenseman for Delaware University before being drafted 34th overall in the 2011 Major League Lacrosse draft. He suffered several concussions that have impacted his career and life, but is now doing much better and tearing up stages in and around Boston as a musician. Pat, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Great to be here.
Awesome. And Haley Warden is also joining us. Haley was a two-time All-American midfielder for James Madison University. She was the 2018 NCAA Championships Most Outstanding Performer. She is a member of the 2022 U.S. Women's Training Team and is now an assistant coach back at her alma mater. Haley, we appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, we'll start here with you, Haley. And I know you recently suffered a concussion actually off the field, away from lacrosse. Can you walk us through how that happened and your experience finally getting into concussion protocol and being in protocol before you could come back and play again?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I was in a car accident and I thought like it was a minor one and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, oh, my car got a little damaged. My head hurts a little bit, but nothing like super serious. Like I've had concussions in the past and I thought it was nothing of the sort. It didn't feel like it. But then I tried to get back into training and I just like didn't feel 100%. I felt slow. I felt like this is harder than it normally is. And then I was like, maybe I should get this checked out. Like maybe I'm fine, but I have like USA training in like a month. Like I have to train. Like I need to be ready. Like I'm competing for something. And so I like tried to push it off. Then I got to the point where I was just like, you know what, like I need to check this out. Like I don't feel normal. I don't feel like myself. So I went into my trainer and I started to go through some of the concussion protocols with them. And I thought that it was enough at the time. And like a few weeks later, I thought I was good. Turns out I wasn't, because when I showed up to the US training, I tried to play again and I was just like, I still am not okay. Like I'm not right. And I told some of my teammates, I was like, hey, like I don't feel right. These lights are hurting my eyes. Like I feel slow. And they're like, you need to say something to the coaches. Like it's not worth it. It's totally it's not worth it for you to even play and not perform how you want to, or like put yourself in harm. So that's kind of my experience right now with concussions. Most recently, it happened like November, so I'm all good now.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with us. And it sounds like you kind of understood the situation, and your teammates did as well. Of that there's priorities here, and let's get you healthy before trying to push through. So we'll come back to you in a little bit. And Pat, I know you've had a very intense experience with concussion recovery and post-concussion syndrome.
Right.
So can you walk us through what your battle with PCS was like, in however much detail you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I've had a few instances dealing with PCS. The first, when I played in one professional game, and at the time I knew I had with my concussion history, I was getting them easier, and I knew that I was kind of on borrowed time, but I still really wanted to play. So I played in one game and took a lacrosse shot to the face, really close range, and I knew kind of instantly, like, this isn't good. I didn't really heal. I kind of was trying to downplay it and convince myself it's not a big deal, and move on with your life. And maybe if you can pretend it didn't really happen, you can kind of trick yourself and be fine, and kind of wishful thinking. And started to have terrible symptoms when I would exercise, and then just like sleeping at night. And it lasted for a way longer time than I could have ever imagined. And I would speak with doctors, and they would say, it's been 3 weeks. This has nothing to do with your concussion. And I would think, I think has to do with my concussion. And I had to see a couple different doctors before I reached out to Chris, because I read his book Head Games. And then talking with you guys, it was like you were shining such a light on this condition that so many people have no idea what they're talking about. And it was like, even talking with my parents about it and my friends or coaches, it was like, well, you're a month out of your injury. You should be fine. You're good to play. You're clear. And I was like, there's no way I'm clear. I know my body. Like, I know the way I feel. So yeah, I mean, my PCS, it has taken a long time, and can be really, really, hard and dark, and you're almost like in a dream state. I felt like at times where you're not really living and you're not really sleeping. You're kind of at this in between, and it's awful. But speaking with you guys and learning that you will get better. It's going to take time, but you're going to get better, and that has been like a lifesaver for me. So that's why I'm always grateful to do stuff like this, and I love following you guys along, because I think it's wonderful what you guys have done.
Yeah, and we love your story too, because it wasn't lacrosse where you found your passion back. Through music, you've been able to find a whole different avenue of success and inspire
Absolutely.
others out there. So
Yeah,
really appreciate you sharing that, and for everything you do for us. So from a lacrosse player perspective, you each might have a little bit different side of things, because Pat, you played a little bit longer ago, but I'd love to hear from both of you kind of that in the moment when you take that big hit to the head. And Pat, you kind of described that hit to the head where you're trying to like trick yourself and convince yourself of figuring if you're all right, but it doesn't have obvious concussion signs. You're not knocked out on the turf where someone would take you out. It's more invisible to the outside world. What is that like as an athlete when that's going on internally and you're kind of going, should I speak up? Should I keep playing? How do I manage this? What is that like inside your brain as you're talking through that injury?
Haley, you can go. You want?
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I haven't had like a major blow in a game where like I've gotten a concussion. I've actually never gotten a concussion playing sports. I've all external, which is interesting to me. But I would say, like, in the moment, like if you're not feeling like yourself and like you feel kind of like fuzzy, and I think that for the most part, like if you're not going to help the team and that like you're off, like at that point, like why would you be in the first place? One, for the team, and two, for yourself. Like you're not helping anybody. So like at that point, I would probably speak up and be like, hey, like this doesn't feel right. Like I'm off. And like I would pull myself out in that moment. But I know that it's super difficult to get to that point where you can admit that, like, yeah, I'm like not okay. Like that whatever hit happened, or however my head was like thrown back or any of that, like at some point it's hard. Like no one wants to like pull themselves. But it knowing in like the long run that's best for you and those around you, I think it's really important.
Well said. How about you, Pat?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think in my career, there was an instance in high school when there's a bigger player coming down the field and I was very aggressive and I collided with him. I hit him as hard as I could. And then I instantly knew something was off, and I pulled myself off almost because like there was no way I could have continued the game, and I ended up throwing up on the sideline a little bit. That was a very severe instance. I've had other instances where, I think part of it too is like sometimes you don't really know. You're not totally sure. A lot of times it hasn't been pain. Like you twist your ankle, it's pain instantly. With the concussion, it's unique because it's not really like you're in pain, and it doesn't look like you're hurt for the most part, unless you're bleeding or anything like that. But so it's kind of a tricky thing where you kind of have to be, you've sacrificed so much to get to where you are. You've taken beatings on the arm, on whatever it is, and then now here's just another injury or you've collided with somebody and you've been rattled a little bit. And I think you don't always know, sometimes, later in my career when I was getting concussions quickly, I would have just the tiniest little hits and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, am I okay? It's almost like a computer going through checking itself. Like, are you okay? And you obviously want to be okay. And then you're like, well, is this a self-fulfilling prophecy? Am I getting nervous about it and making it a bigger deal than it is? But I think like the big thing is if it's a pretty gnarly hit, you'll know, and it's important to be honest with yourself and don't stick around. It's going to be hard. I know the athletes today, and like they don't want to sub themselves out, and I get that. Like there's a reason it's hard to get to where you are at that level, and it's by kind of grinding it out. But it's just so important to with an injury like this to be careful. And the other thing I would think, like the big thing I would tell younger players or kids is like I was a bigger guy. I was always tall, and I would always seek contact and look for the big hit and try to hit the kid as hard as I could. And I really wish I hadn't done that. Like lacrosse is a physical game. You can have a lot of fun playing physically without seeking those big hits. And you can still be physical and tough and hit kids when you have to, but I wish I hadn't hunted and sought it out the way I did and kind of established myself, or at least try to anyway. I wasn't that hardcore. I'm just, when you get old, like I know my college teammates are gonna hear this and be like, Pat, come on, dude. Like you're pretty, they're gonna give me a hard time about it. But seriously, I felt pressure as a bigger player to look for the big hits, and I kind of would I know Brody Merrill is a famous lacrosse player, and he teaches his kids, play the ball. You don't have to go body, like play the ball. And I think that's a great message and something I wish I had done.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point about what we think about what toughness means. And everyone wants to be tough, and tough is a huge quality of being successful in sports. But toughness doesn't have to look like what you're describing, Pat, where it's just seeking out contact just for the sake of it. So
right,
yeah, great perspective there. And our Team Up Speak Up program, that the reason we're here today about talking about this is it's designed to get ahead of those moments and really take that should I stay in, should I stay out, or should I come out decision out of the hands of the actual person who might be concussed, and really activate those teammates to feel empowered to say, I don't think that Haley's right. I don't think that Pat's right. So Team Up Speak Up is a preseason speech that says to the team, if you see a teammate with a concussion, it's on you to speak up for them and make sure that they get help. So as a player on a team, how valuable is it to hear that from the start and know that that's just kind of how we do things around here, and that's the culture of the team?
I'll go. I think it's super important. I mean, even being a college coach, like I can recognize when a kid might not be right. And I think that if it starts from the top down. So if the coaches are going to be totally open and honest and I guess encourage the kids to speak up in those situations, I think that like we can lead the way. At least me, like I've had multiple kids on teams where like they've had concussions and I can recognize when those kids aren't right. And I'm like, are you okay? Like you need to be pulled. Like she's like, and then like I asked the teammates, I'm like, do you think your teammate is okay? And they're like, no. And so I think that the more that we can encourage these kids to recognize when somebody needs help, let them know that it's okay. I really do think that it starts from the top down. So the more that this message can be spread from the beginning, I think the better off we're going to be.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think it's kind of the team up, speak up. It's kind of setting the culture the way it should be. I remember when I would play, I would get a concussion, or if I sat out for a concussion, it was kind of like, why are you sitting out? Like, you bumped your head? What? And it's kind of like, if the coaches can set the precedent early, like, we respect concussions as an injury. We take it seriously. And I think that's going to come with more players like Jay Jalbert was one of the best lacrosse players ever. And the way he talked to me about his concussion history, and he no one's questioning him as a tough player. He was the toughest. And as more and more former players that we respect speak up about concussions, and the Brett Favre ad you guys did was wonderful. I think that'll start to change the culture of team sports. And I think that's huge, because a lot of times people would be like, you're still out with your concussion? Like what? And that used to drive me nuts. Like, because I would be like, yo, first of all, I'm so much better than you. And you don't have, you're a little wuss, like blah, 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 blah. But, it's almost like the players that are kind of grinding in there and getting the tough plays are the ones that are more likely to get concussion, so that used to drive me nuts. But exactly, I think the culture, the coaches down, if you're setting a tone early that we respect concussions, we're looking out for each other. It's we will rather lose you for a game or two than lose you for the season or for the whole career. And I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's a perfect place to end. And two players with the accolades that you two have and have done it at the highest level, speaking out about this is a great place to keep this conversation going and to help this get out to more people. So thank you both so much for taking the time and providing your wisdom and experience with this issue. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brandon. I want to give a huge kudos to USA Lacrosse for being great partners on Team Up Speak Up. Special thanks to Dr. Vaughan, Kellie Loehr, Pat Dowling, and Haley Warden for joining us for today's webinar and for all the valuable information and perspective they provided. We want to see those Team Up Speak Up pledges from the lacrosse community pour in. So be sure to take the pledge to bring the speech to your team at teamupspeakup.org. And when you give the speech, record it and share it on social media using #TeamUpSpeakUp. Once again, I'm Dr. Chris Nowinski. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, Team Up, Speak Up. It's a simple speech that could save a season, a career, or even a life.